This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, Sean, for anyone who hasn't heard our weekend show, we've had a lot of new listeners join the podcast this week, so I thought I'll give a very quick rundown of how it works. It's not like the other shows throughout the week, is it? This is a very competitive environment, and the entire idea of it is to find the biggest and the best stories of the week. And so we'll each nominate a story in each category. The categories are the biggest business story of the week, the most remarkable business story of the week, the sleeper story, one that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and then our favourite story. And of course, because it is a competition and because we can't sit in judgment of ourselves,
although we try. We
do sometimes, and we often feel very free to disagree with the judge and try and impose our own judgments on these categories. But we do need an adjudicator, and that is our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Michael and Sean.
Now, Adam, because I've just done a little summary, could you give us a very brief, and even briefer summary of what you're looking for in these categories? What's your judging criteria?
I can. We've tested and learned from this over the years to come down to 5 categories. 1, topicality. 2, timeliness. 3, economic impact. 4, my subjective bias, of course. And 5, a little bit of flair, melodrama.
What this show is, for anyone who hasn't listened, this show is a study in sportsmanship, really. It is just basically, it's how to let go. It's how to just accept a judgment and move on. Let's move on with the show. Let's get into the biggest story of the week. And Sean, as the winner last week, you get to go first in the biggest story.
Well, it's the economy, stupid. As said by James Carville, Bill Clinton's strategist when he won the 1992 US presidential election. Let me finish my sentence before you mock me. Of course it was the economy. Massive week. Inflation for the 12 months to the end of January came in at 3.4%, lower than expected. Clearly, goods inflation is pretty much under control, but not services inflation yet. That tends to include a larger component of wages, and given the wage rises recently, it's not that surprising that services inflation is elevated. It will get there, it will fall, but it might just take a little bit of time. What's encouraging is that while other economies, notably the US, showed a pickup in inflation early in the year, that hasn't happened here. We also had retail sales figures showing that spending is pretty flat. If you look at some of the retailers' results, turnover was pretty flat for them too, so that all kind of seems to make sense. But at least businesses are investing and keen to invest. So where do we land at the end of the week? There is a slight, very slight, chance of a rate cut at the next Reserve Bank board meeting, but the bond markets have priced in a cut at the end of the year. I think it's almost at the point of confidently, there's a lot of disclaimers on this one, almost, nearly, maybe, perhaps, at the point of confidently, fairly confident, more or less confident, saying no more rate rises. This week, it was all about the economy. Brief, to the point, started off with a little dramatic flair. Michael, what about you?
That's a good story, Sean. It's not the biggest, though. Perhaps.
Really?
Perhaps. And here's an idea. Maybe we could start a new category called mildly interesting, and yours could win that. Because the biggest story this week is about the marvelously resilient housing market. Because here we are, with interest rates at their highest point in well over a decade, and house prices just keep on rising. In fact, they had their strongest monthly gain since last October, 0.6% in February. It takes growth over the last 12 months to 8.9%. And this isn't just one market that had a good month, mind you. Prices went up in every major city and region with the exception of Hobart. Melbourne is growing again, so too Sydney. Perth is absolutely booming. How about in Perth? Over the last year, some suburbs have gone up by nearly 25, nearly 30% over the last year. It's quite extraordinary. Adelaide and Brisbane for the last month growing around 1%. This is good news, right? Auction clearance rates have bounced back too. If you want economic impact, Adam, then obviously don't forget the value of the Australian housing market is more than $10 trillion. And don't forget the wealth effect too, as people start to feel richer, as the value of their property rises. Will it continue? That is the big question here. Experts aren't tipping a boom year. Money is still tight. Unemployment is rising, but demand continues to outstrip supply. Put it all together, and you have got the biggest story of the week and the story that people will be talking about at barbecues today. They won't be talking about kind of inflation. They'll be talking about, did you see how much our houses are worth now? And that makes it the biggest story of the week, Adam.
Well, sorry, firstly, I'd just like to correct you. They will be at a barbecue this weekend talking about the capital expenditure figures from the ABS during the week.
Yes, that's right, because you go to great barbecues, don't you?
Yes, that's right.
Goodness me. Adam, judge us, please.
Okay, very good openings. Dead heat, gentlemen. Very, very high scores. And what was tipping the scales for me is that the inflation number affects everybody, and not everyone owns houses or real estate. So about a third of people own their own home outright, a third mortgages, a third just rent. So the house prices thing doesn't actually affect everybody, but it is such a vital indicator. And Sean, this was a monthly reading and not a quarterly reading of the inflation data. So as you pointed out, it doesn't have everything we need to know. And that's where it just fell down for me.
CapEx, mate, CapEx, business investment.
Sorry, the barbecue stopper.
Sean, do you take palm cards to barbecues? It kind of feels like you'd be the kind of person that busts out your kind of conversation starters. Did you see those CapEx figures?
I take ABS readouts.
Oh, hello. Oh, that is one exotic, slightly erotic party. Keys in the bowl and spreadsheets out.
Can we get on with the most remarkable story, please?
Most remarkable story, only one option this week. So I'm sorry, Sean, I'm going first. I'm going to take this one because this is the story that has gripped Canberra. It's gripped the whole country, really. It is a story of spies, of traitors, of espionage. It feels like it has a movie in it here. We had ASIO Director General Mike Burgess delivered a speech this week that contained more than a few bombshells. How about this? Another country's intelligence service had set up a dedicated unit to focus on Australia, and it was a, quote, sophisticated foreign interference operation. Now, the operation included the cultivation of bureaucrats with security clearances, and they were also targeting academics and business figures and other political identities and even law enforcement officials. And they were basically offering them thousands of dollars to hand over reports, and they were offering bonuses if that contained exclusive information. And so members of this unit were posing as consultants and headhunters and local government officials and researchers. Perhaps, though, the most shocking revelation of all of this, because all of this is it's quite confronting to think that this is going on at this scale within Australia. But perhaps the most confronting element of it was that a former politician had been, quote, cultivated and recruited. And that, another quote, this politician sold out their country, party, and former colleagues to advance the interests of the foreign regime. Now, of course, this sparked a huge amount of speculation over who the former politician is, with Mike Burgess under a lot of pressure to name names, and he refused to do that. A lot of that pressure came from other politicians, for instance, like former Treasurer Joe Hockey, who basically said, this person appears to have been a traitor to Australia and he needs to be identified in order to avoid kind of smearing other former politicians. And anyway, Mike Burgess has refused to identify this particular individual and said that that person is no longer of security concern. And he said that in this case, while we want the Foreign Intelligence Service to know its cover is blown, we do not want it to unpick how we discovered its activities. Still, though, the story is remarkable for a few reasons. One, that a foreign country has targeted Australia so intently, right? Number two, that they allegedly succeeded in turning a politician against his own country. And three, that even though Mike Burgess wouldn't identify who that person was, he said a lot of other stuff, right? That the boss of our main spy agency was so candid in revealing all of this. And part of it is as a message to that other country to say, hey, we're onto you. But it was all part of his annual threat assessment. This has got movie written all over it. It has got most remarkable written all over it. Sean, what's yours?
I agree it's got remarkable written all over it. I don't think any of it matches Adam's criteria. Where's the economic significance?
Like, depends on what the country is, Sean. It depends on who that other country is that's been targeting us. And there could actually be quite a great deal of, and I was going to go into this, but it requires a lot more speculation than you would like.
Oh, here we go. God.
You started this, Sean.
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, reading between the lines.
Oh, yeah, this will be good. Go on.
There are certain countries that are known to have very proactive units that are involved in other countries.
It's just rolling off the tongue, isn't it?
And if it's one of those particular countries that we have kind of a fairly strong trade relationship with, then there is economic impact, and it requires a very fine line to be walked in terms of diplomacy. And
what Michael's trying to say is go and listen to the Michael Shoebridge interview we had this week. Michael is a guru on these issues, and Michael actually named China and Russia as the two foreign entities with the largest spy network. And then he started listing the different spy networks out of China. It was pretty funny. I mean, incredible. And Michael Thompson, I appreciate you actually plagiarizing Michael Shoebridge here for your benefit. But I do think everyone should go and listen to the Michael Shoebridge interview because he gives us the full, is it the full ball and dice? What is it? The full ball and chain? Pool, ball, and the whole lot.
Box and dice, Sean?
Box and dice? Well, so what are we putting in this box? We've got dice and balls and chains and everything. He's got the lot.
It's better than the keys, mate. Better than the keys.
Oh, anyway. Keys in, spreadsheets out. Whew. Rock on.
Sean.
Thank you. I'll get on to it. Remarkable. I mean, that is a remarkable story. So I'm totally with you there. Don't think it matches any of Adam's criteria. Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, which still confuses me, hit a record in Aussie dollars this week. BTC Markets booked a Bitcoin trade at an Australian dollar record of $97,000 a unit. A combination of a strong Bitcoin, it's trading around $63,000 a unit, and a weak Aussie dollar means the token's value in our currency hit a record. Now, the reason Bitcoin has run so hard in US dollars is the huge inflows from investors into exchange-traded funds offering Bitcoin and other digital tokens. Add in the weak Aussie dollar and you get a new record. Bitcoin has been around for about 15 years. No one's really sure where it came from or who created it. There was a white paper authored by a Satoshi Nakamoto titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that appeared in a cryptography mailing list back in 2008. It's grown from that. There's a fella in the UK, I think at the moment, trying to prove that he is actually Satoshi Nakamoto, though I mean, who knows? Who knows? The fact that we don't even know where it came from, the fact that no one backs it. I mean, certainly central banks don't back it. Well, what backs it? Investors back it, I suppose. That's what backs it. Yet Bitcoin is at a record, at least in Aussie dollars. It's just the ride of Bitcoin and the push that exchange-traded funds has given it is totally remarkable. And that affects all other asset classes because all of a sudden you're holding bonds and you're holding equities, you're holding real estate, you might be holding alternative assets like private equity funds and stuff like that. Suddenly Bitcoin's part of it. And this has come from nothing. And this week it hit a record in Aussie dollars. Remarkable. Adam.
Right. Michael, the rule of law is very important to business. That's what I was hearing you say when you were talking about spies.
Yes, I'm glad you picked up on that, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, and certainty, of an operating environment. That's what I heard.
Yep, subtext.
So, having trust in our federal politicians, legislation, that all has impact on business and how indeed our rules of law are being enforced. Having said that, it didn't quite bring home the economic impact for me. Whereas Bitcoin, which is just, I still find it remarkable. To Sean's points, it's who knows who created it. There's no backing for the currency. It is literally worth what people think it is worth. And it's hit a record high. It's incredible. So, Sean, you have to win for Remarkable Story of the Week.
I thought I had no chance.
You know what? I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to do what we now refer to as doing a Sean. I'm just going to let it go. Mm-hmm. I'm going to move on. I'm going to focus on winning. It's 1.5 to half a point. Sean is in the lead.
Mm-hmm.
We will take a quick break and we will come back with a sleeper story of the week.
Okay, I'm going to lead into the favourite story of the week, mostly because during that break, there's been
an exchange of views.
An exchange of views between Mickey T and Damsky. We've been doing this podcast for, nearly 4 years, and I think those two are remarkably close, always have been, gotten on well, worked many years beforehand. I think that ad break might have changed it all.
Oh, just for context, all I did was provide Adam with some feedback on his judgment, and I only used 2 letters to describe his decision: BS, because that's what it was.
And that's where it started.
Indeed. Let's get on with the sleeper story of the week. Sleeper story is an interesting category, isn't it? Because we're looking for something that's not getting the attention that it probably should or might otherwise be getting, or it could be a story that's going to get more attention down the track. Sean, what have you found?
Well, I reckon M&A is back by stealth. No massive takeovers, but plenty of smaller ones. Now, it's all been kind of caught up in reporting season and remarkable spy stories and things like that. But this week, cement group Adbri recommended shareholders accept a $2.1 billion buyout proposal from Irish giant CRH. The CSR board this week backed a $9 per share offer from French group Saint-Gobain just 6 weeks after the initial approach was made. Now, remember a couple of weeks ago, Seven West said it wanted to take out 28% of Boral that it doesn't own. That's 3 of the big building material companies in Australia, Adbri, CSR and Boral, basically going private. What's happened to our building material sector? Who knows? Then there's the Alcoa $3.3 billion bid for Illumina, Aussie Broadband's $466 million bid for Superloop, which was rejected. Of course, we have the ANZ $4.9 billion bid for Suncorp's banking assets pending. They haven't actually made that bid yet. It's pending. It's actually been a really quiet 12 months or so on the M&A front, but I reckon it's back. We've had 4 or 5 deals this week alone. My sleeper story, Michael.
I love that a story that's worth billions and billions of dollars is a sleeper story. That's the kind of sleeper story that I would nominate, Sean. That's something that's not really a sleeper at all. But look, I'm not going to criticize. A serious story for me this week, and I'm putting it in the sleeper category, not because it didn't get any attention this week. It did. It actually did get some attention this week, but because it really only gets this big surge of attention once a year, and it needs to be a bigger ongoing focus. So it's kind of like a reverse sleeper story. It's about the gender pay gap. And this week, the Workplace Gender Equality Agency released its data on salaries at businesses with 100 plus employees, and the pay gap has hit 14.5% on average, and that went up to 19% once bonuses and allowances and overtime and things like that were factored in. Former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Elizabeth Broderick said, I reckon she probably said it best actually, when she said, while it was disappointing and distressing that most businesses had gender pay gaps, she said it was not surprising. And this is because there's still a lot to do on overcoming those almost historical norms that saw women taking on more household and caregiving responsibilities, and in turn missing out on a lot of those career progression opportunities and things like bonuses and overtime that saw men taking home more money. You had A2 Milk with the biggest gap on the ASX 200 at 40.5%, but Qantas was up there too. AGL was there too, kind of household names. Having more men in high-earning technology and engineering fields also drove the gap. Accommodation and food services had the lowest average median pay gap of any industry at 1.9%. Anyway, overall, there's clearly a lot of work still to be done on this. So it's a sleeper story kind of 51 weeks of the year, not necessarily this week, though. So it really is, it's a reverse sleeper.
A reverse sleeper. It's an Adam type of story, don't you reckon, Michael?
It certainly is. It's got lots of data in it.
It's got data and it's kind of bettering the world story.
Yeah, it's got the social element to it as well. So it's got the potential. Yeah. Meanwhile, Adam is here just furiously still taking down notes. Adam, share with us your verdict.
Very well. So perfect score to Michael. You're both right. It is my kind of story. Very topical, timely, huge economic impact. Like, this doesn't reflect well on men primarily, and it actually doesn't help men either, right? So this just should be fixed. There should be zero difference, and we've got to make that happen. And I know, Michael, you called out A2 Milk. I saw an interview with their CEO, David Bortolussi, this week, and you know what? He stepped right into it. I thought it was really impressive. He just totally owned it. He said, this is where we're at. This is what we're doing. Yes, it's got to change. So I thought that was great role modelling of how to approach it, like not shying away from it, not saying no comment, just stepping right into it. So I thought that was really good. Sean, your story is a ripping sleeper story, but just doesn't win this week.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Did the boss of A2 Milk step into it, or did he lean into it? One of my least favourite words in the world. I'm leaning into that. Are you really? Well, how come you haven't actually done it yet?
In what way?
Yeah. Are you falling over when you lean too far? Anyway, well done, Michael.
Oh,
well done,
thanks,
Michael.
Sean. Thank you. Okay, 1.5 to 1.5. Final story, final category, favourite story. I'll go first on this one.
Righto. Go for it.
All right, there's actually a number of options this week for favourite story, and they're all good. But this one has to be the best. It's quite extraordinary that for years now, right? And this one comes with a lot of context. I'm not going to go through all of the context, but I will just say,
get yourselves a cup of tea, listeners.
For years and years and years, Apple's secret plans to build a car has been one of the most speculated projects in the tech industry and has had everybody fascinated. But now, all of a sudden, this week, it's no more. And that's despite this absolute tech behemoth apparently spending billions on the project in research and development. It has been running for a decade, this project. It was going to be fancy. Really fancy. It was going to be electric. It was going to be self-driving. At one point, it was going to be fully autonomous without even a steering wheel or without any pedals or anything. You just have to get in there and just trust that it knows what it's doing. Not that you would know about any of this, though, officially, because Apple never publicly acknowledged the project. And now, just as quietly, it's pulled the pin. And the focus is instead on AI and gadgets, which is not entirely surprising because EV demand is a bit weaker than expected, whereas AI is obviously absolutely booming. And even Apple's kind of Vision Pro virtual reality headset is taking off. There's about 2,000 staff affected, many being reassigned to other projects. Still though, big call, right? To spend billions upon billions of dollars developing a project across a whole decade, the hours of work that have gone into this, only to say, nope, we're not going to do it anymore. Investors love the news. The share price of Apple surged because it means Apple will focus on what it does best, phones and watches and computers, and kind of really then taking advantage of the AI boom. But I just find this whole story fascinating. And in terms of economic impact, this is like one of the biggest companies in the world making a major decision. And it affects other companies as well. How about Tesla, right? Elon Musk. Did you see kind of he obviously responded via X, the former Twitter, where he did a little kind of shared the story about the demise of the Apple car because it was potentially going to be a big rival to Tesla, with a little kind of saluting emoji and a cigarette, which is just kind of, it's not particularly gracious. And previously, I mean, he has been kind of death riding the whole project for so long. Years ago, he called Apple a Tesla graveyard in an interview. His quote was, if you don't make it at Tesla, you go work at Apple. And it's just like, it's just not necessary, right? I understand that it's competitive, but seriously, that it feels a little bit petty. Anyway, favorite story. It's got so much to it. It's just, and it has been big news this week, but news that is not being officially confirmed. So I should have put it in the sleeper story.
I think you won the sleeper story. Yeah, no, you did well.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'll be satisfied with winning the favourite story as well. Sean, go on.
Yeah, that's a good story. Nothing happened. Yep, going to do something. No, didn't happen. Nothing happened. My favourite story. It's about the Texas guy who made almost $2 million US dollars, $2 million US dollars, by illegally trading on his wife's conversations with her BP colleagues. That's according to the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is kind of cracking down at the moment on couples eavesdropping while working from home. Now, this is a working from home situation which we've all been through. Not necessarily done what this fella's done, but it's something that the regulators are worried about. We don't talk enough about this, eavesdropping on partners or roommates and making money out of it. For months, Tyler Loudon bought shares in a company called Travel Centers of America. He then sold his shares, according to the SEC, in February 2023 when BP announced it was buying Travel Centers of America. It was paying a 74% premium. He made about $1.76 million in profit, according to a report on Bloomberg. The pointy end of this, Tyler Lauder's wife, Mrs. Lauder, don't know what her first name, Mrs. Lauder, She actually worked on the BP mergers and acquisitions team who was working on the deal. She was working about 20 feet away from Tyler in a home office and was totally unaware of what her husband was doing. When he ultimately confessed to her, she moved out of the house, later filed for divorce. She reported his trades to BP, who then fired her, despite finding no evidence that she knowingly leaked the deal. It's my favourite story because, I mean, it's just, like, I'm sure most of us don't have information that's tradable, but everyone who has worked from home with a partner at times have heard stuff you think, oh, really? That's boring, or don't want to hear about that, or wish I didn't know about that, or
Yeah, Jackie's listening to this podcast.
That's right.
Yeah, kind of going, oh God, that is boring.
So that's
Adam.
my favourite story, Adam.
Oh, sorry, I just decided to wrap you up. I'm like the music at the end of the Oscars acceptance speech. I just jump in when I've had enough. Adam, please take it away.
I did love it. Is an excellent story, the eavesdropping husband who's now divorced. I mean, that poor woman lost her job and her husband out of that betrayal. Great story, though. On this one, Michael, I have to give it to you for favourite story of the week. And I know that you might think, oh, this is a bad thing that they've invested all this money and it's going to be closed. But I think that there's good in this, that they've had a go at something and reconciled that they have to stop. Now, 2,000 people, billions spent, not going to come to something. But a company like Apple has to keep pushing boundaries. And so I do applaud them for doing that and for stopping. So I think that's why this is my favourite story of the week.
All right. Overall scores 2.5 to 1.5. Let's look at the points for the stories.
Michael, this is up there with one of your PBs, 95.
Ooh.
And 91 to Sean out of 100.
Well done, Michael.
Thank you. I'm so unaccustomed to winning that I'm not entirely sure what to say. I think it's thank you. Normally,
is that tears?
Yes. If I role model, if I look to Sean, I think here is where I would gloat or something.
I feel you're doing that. Well done.
No, I'm not. I promise. That was a good result. Great battle. Good stories.
Yeah. Go on.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok. Oh, before you both go, very quickly, how about Sean's Vegemite hat that he wore on the video that we posted on Instagram and TikTok this week?
I have never seen anything like it.
It is a unique gift to take. You were doing a story about inflation and yet you managed to do it all in this wide-brimmed Vegemite hat and this loud shirt, and you turned it all into a story about your next upcoming holiday. I'm like, that is a gift.
3 weeks away.
Anyway, it's worth checking out. So you can find us on Instagram and you can find us on TikTok and LinkedIn and Facebook and X, pretty much everywhere. But those videos you'll see on Insta and TikTok. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Great Business News. Have a great weekend.